Greetings! You've reached the Signal Watch Halloween series. Join me and my creepy cadre of co-contributors as we examine artifacts from the catacombs, boldly explore creeping horrors, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this spooky.
Woo! Welcome back for another Halloween Spooktacular.
Hello, happy Halloween. That never gets old. sounds like you put on some shorts that are too small.
We're back with a couple more vampire movies, Simon.
We are, yes. Vampire Circus from 1971, directed by Robert Young, and Innocent Blood from 1992, directed by John Landis. And I guess we can start with Vampire Circus.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking a little bit before we get jumping in about how these two actually pair and kind of, which we didn't think about that at all. We just said two vampire movies that we didn't watch with the last podcast.
We just went one that one. Well, they both do different things with the vamp. So last time we watched Vamp and Fright Night, and and I guess the similarity with all four of these is they all try to do something different with the vampire kind of story. So Vampire Circus is very much. I mean, I love Hammer movies, Hammer horror movies, and I also love especially the late period Hammer when they were kind of struggling financially, and like the kind of international backing had kind of pulled out from the American studios, from Columbia and kind of Fox. And Warner, so they were kind of struggling, and also the British film industry was shrinking. Also, new horror films were coming along that were making them look suddenly really old-fashioned, stuff like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So in their desperation, I think Hammer came up with some really interesting ideas on established kind of genres, and I wrote a few down because I was thinking, around this period they had Blood from the Mummy's Tomb, which is a mummy film that doesn't have a mummy in it. It's actually like more possession.
Okay.
This woman's possessed by an Egyptian goddess and starts murdering people. There's Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter.
I've seen it.
Who's kind of like, almost like a bit of a James Bond type character. He's got his gadgets.
Yeah, people have a lot of love for Captain Kronos, and I think there's been a lot of that spilled into depictions of Van Helsing and other stuff since.
Totally.
Including in Van Helsing.
Well, yeah, the ladies love him, and he's got a hunchback assistant. And, there's also Hands of the Ripper around the early 70s, same time, which was kind of showed that maybe the daughter of Jack the Ripper could kind of get psychologically possessed by him almost, and become a killer herself. There was Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires that kind of took Dracula and vampirism, into the Middle East. And basically had kung fu. It was kind of, I guess like if Man with a Golden Gun was Bond embracing kung fu, then Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires was Hammer trying to jump on that bandwagon. Even Christopher Lee in the Satanic Rites of Dracula, they updated it to at the time modern London, and had him kind of running around trying to kind of build a bubonic plague to kill everybody in the world because he was fed up being a vampire. And Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde did a twist on Dr. Jekyll. So Hammer were, taking these old things, because I think even Hammer realised by the early 70s that, their box office was shrinking, and while they were still, kind of slapping out another Dracula and another Frankenstein. And I think the Frankensteins actually tried harder, were more interesting. I think with the Draculas, I love the Draculas with Christopher Lee, but everyone, he gets resurrected, normally by a priest falling over and banging their head by accident at the start. And then we're introduced to the young couple, and, Dracula takes a liking to the girl and chases her around. And then at the end, he falls off a cliff or onto a cross or into a thorn bush. And that's it until next time. And I think even Hammer realised that, that was diminishing returns, which is why Vampire Circus tried to do something different.
It's really different, but it's really good. I was recommended this movie about 4 years ago by my friend Justin, who I meant to actually invite to come down and record with us for this and completely forgot.
Hi, Justin.
Very sorry.
Sorry about that, Justin.
But Justin tends to pick stuff that's a little
off.
Yeah. He managed to kind of find stuff in the margins and in the niches and recommend it. And I try and watch stuff when he mentions it to me. He was actually the first person who, when I was 14, showed me Halloween. So we owe a lot to Justin and my film viewing experience.
Good taste.
So I was like, yeah, of course, I'll try and find. And initially, I could only find Vampire Circus on beta at I Love Video.
It was hard to get hold of for a long time, and I think it's only in the last maybe say 8 years that they finally brought out a decent Blu-ray with some extras on.
Yeah, and it's also shown up on Amazon Prime streaming, which is where I watched it, and I loved it. I was not really sure what to expect. The beginning...
Is this the first time you've seen it?
No, this is the second time I've seen it. And what surprised me the first time was I don't really know what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be a little surreal, whatever, which it is.
It's definitely surreal.
But it comes right out of the gate, kind of with a more traditional vampire story. But it's like, here's all the stuff we're putting into a Hammer movie in this year. We're putting in,
tits.
Right. Nudity, sex, we're killing children. We're, all these things that they were doing to kind of raise the stakes to where horror movies were in this period, but keep it within that framework of kind of the, I think this is supposed to take place in Germany.
Yeah, it's always a bit hazy when they set these. And Dracula...
Well, they said it was Stettel was the name of the village, which means village.
Yeah.
So, but not in German.
I mean, a lot of the Dracula films moved around, well, obviously, to modern day at the time, 72, 73, back to Victorian London, and then right back into, almost the Middle Ages. So it kind of depended, I guess, which costumes they had available.
Right.
But it's funny because, you remind me, watching this film really comes out of the gate kind of swinging. And, it's a bit like Rambo at the end of Rambo 2. It's like, it's just like firing everything at the audience in the first... Because there's like a mini movie almost in the first 12 minutes before the credits.
Yeah.
And it's basically the villagers tracking down... Well, not really tracking down, but going to the Count's castle... Because the school teacher's wife has been kind of having an affair with him, but also taking kids to him for them to kill.
Yeah, children have been disappearing from the village.
And it's a little bit dodgy, watching it. I mean, it's kind of, bordering bad taste because, they obviously kill these children. And, he bites them and drinks their blood. But then they have sex afterwards. And he actually says, one lust feeds another. Mm-hmm. And then the villagers storm the castle, old styley, manage to stake him. And then the wife... Then there's another kind of dodgy scene where the wife... they're going to... I think the father of the dead girl wants to kill the wife. But the villagers go, no, there's a better way. And they kind of whip her. But then briefly, when they're taking their belts off, it kind of looks like they might even be about to rape her. It goes almost like a little bit Straw Dogs.
Yeah.
So it kind of just gives out an uneasy feeling, which I think is good for a horror film. Yeah. But you have this kind of mini movie for 12 minutes, and then boom, then the actual movie starts, which is kind of hilarious when I was watching it last night, because suddenly, before it kind of says, 15 years ago we killed the Count, all the same guys are seen around wearing old wigs. Yeah. And they
didn't hire old guys and make them try and look younger. They hired guys for the right look, yeah.
Well, before they said 15 years, I was like, was that experience that traumatic?
Oh, God.
But then, the rest of the film is pretty much the curse of the Counts that he said, at the start as they killed him, I'm gonna come back and destroy you all. I guess his kinsmen come into the village disguised as a circus and start messing with everybody and killing the children off.
Yeah. There's not many movies with the notion of a nightmare circus. I guess there was that TV show that was on HBO a while back. I always go back to Something Wicked This Way Comes, which I covered with Nathan like a year ago. Look for that podcast. It's episode something or other from a long time ago. But I love that idea of this kind of like, everything that you find a little unsettling about a circus is in fact like absolutely true. And they kind of rove from town to town and pick up people along the way. And
well, even before the vampire stuff, because nobody really, even though it's pretty obvious to you and me watching it, because people are turning into bats midair.
Yeah.
I think the villagers are like, this is good. This is good illusions. But even before they twig that they're vampires, I think there's a mistrust of, gypsies still children, and where's my boy gone? Oh, he's over there. Okay, I thought the gypsies had taken him.
Yeah.
So it kind of plays on fears of circuses, and it's funny that we're watching this the same week, or nearly the same week, that It Chapter 2 comes out, which features a circus in it, where, because of course Pennywise is a clown. I think they did a great job, and I just love the fact that even over the opening credits, there's almost subliminal flashes of the Count's face as the castle ages and decays over time after they burn it down. And just lots of little things like that. There's lots of little weird kind of like, I guess like cinematography or photographic tricks all the way through it, which just makes it more interesting.
Yeah, they did a lot with not a huge budget. I mean, even the circus is practically impressionistic because they apparently could only afford like 4 circus wagons.
4 wagons,
and, there's no big top. They're just performing, on benches in their woodland set.
A gold monkey.
Yeah, they managed to get a tiger, a panther, and a monkey.
Monkey's pretty cheerful until he gets shot.
Right, and David Prowse plays the strongman, which is very exciting.
Well, let me give a rundown here because I wrote a few of these down last night. So Adrian Corey is the gypsy woman. She was in Doctor Who, and probably most famously Clockwork Orange.
Right, that's where I recognize her from.
Played the cat lady, I think, who they're kind of attacked. Thorley Waters was the Burgermeister, and he always played the kind of bumbling, bewildered kind of guy. But he'd been in a lot of Hammers. He'd been in a couple of the Frankensteins. Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, and Frankenstein Cradle Women, and Dracula Prince of Darkness. Lala Ward, who played the female acrobat. She was famous in Doctor Who for a couple of seasons and was a female Time Lord in the 70s, and actually married Tom Baker, who was Doctor Who.
Oh, crazy.
For a couple of years. David Prowse, who was also in Clockwork Orange, of course, and Darth Vader. Hey, Darth Vader. And actually, so Emil, the kind of sexy cousin of the Count, I guess, who, when he did talk in the film, had a lovely, lovely Shakespearean baritone. But unfortunately, I feel like out of all the vampires, he also looked like he had a mouthful of pie when he was trying to keep his fangs in. But he played Gobbler in Raiders of the Lost Ark. About the 4th villain in Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was thinking the other day, we were talking about a Bond film can be measured by how many great villains it has in it. Raiders of the Lost Ark, of course, had Belloc. It had the Nazi guy. It had the guy who fights in front of the plane, the huge guy. And it had, down the rank, Anthony Higgins, who I think had his jeep forced off the cliff by Indiana Jones towards the end. Also, he was also in one of my favourite films, Young Sherlock Holmes, as Professor Wrath, who's revealed right at the end to be Moriarty.
Okay, yeah, well, which, by the way, is, I don't know, it'll be happening in October when this gets released, but that is streaming, if you have Amazon Prime membership, that's streaming for free right now, and I was planning to watch it in the next few weeks.
Great movie. I just ruined it for you.
It's all right. I've seen it. I saw it as a kid.
You've seen it before.
Times, yeah.
But yeah, amazing cast. And partly, I think, again, this is because the film industry was shrinking. Not only did they get some Hammer regulars in here, but they got all these amazing theatrical actors. And, I mean, I think David Prowse and Adrian Corey were both. This was literally the year before they did Clockwork Orange. So you got some great people in here.
Yeah, it's it truly is I think a good Halloween horror, even though they're not doing like, oh, there's ghosts and stuff, but it's as far as a vampire movie goes, I think it's a really good one for this month because it does lean hard into the horror. It doesn't spill over into action adventure.
Yeah.
It has. You don't know what's going to happen to various characters because the village is so big, frankly, as far as the cast goes. You don't know who's going to get, popped off as they go along. And
that was
the vampires are mad, kind of in a good Christopher Lee sort of like, I'm going to kill you now sort of way. Yeah.
They're nasty.
But they're kind of holding it all back as they go about their business. And the guy who's the little person who plays the jester.
Yeah.
Totally unsettling when he pulls his face off.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of,
well, also it's that weird mix of some of them appear to be human kind of helpers of the vampires, and some obviously vampires.
Yeah.
And shapeshifters. Because, so this is a spoiler for the plot. But what I'd forgotten about it watching it was Adrian Corey is actually the schoolmaster's wife.
Right.
Kind of disguised.
The first time I watched it, I figured it out about 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah,
and I don't remember. It was before they suggested it was. I was somehow I started putting it together. But she is. She absolutely is.
And there's a lovely little bit at the end, which could have been accidental, could have been on purpose. Give them the benefit where after he's been killed and she's been killed, they're kind of lying on the floor, almost holding hands.
I think that was intentional.
Yeah.
Get your artistry where you can.
Also, before I forget, Lynn Frederick was played, I guess, his daughter, which was it Dora? I think it was Dora. I mixed it up because the other one,
Rose,
the slightly slutty one was Rosa.
Yeah.
But Dora was played by Lynn Frederick, who was pretty, a famous actress in the 70s and married Peter Sellers. I think she was his last wife.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
She was actually pretty good for what could have been a pretty thankless role. I thought they gave it, as Jamie pointed out when we were watching it, she's like, Dora's basically saving everyone's butts by just kind of shoving this cross off. And anyway.
That's a good segue into, let's talk about vampire lore. Because I feel like Hammer... One of the weak points of this to me was Hammer using the unintentional crosses. Anything can be used as a cross. I could use my pencils as a cross now if you were a vampire.
But that goes back to the classic Peter Cushing Van Helsing crossing the candlesticks.
That was good though, but surely sitting here in your room, aren't we surrounded by crosses anyway? Wouldn't vampires be freaking out all the time?
Oh, yes, because if you've not been in this room, it's completely full of crucifixes. Yes, of course, you could cross any two objects in this room, and I guess potentially, the crossbow thing was a little dodgy.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose beheading works. I did like at the end, again, massive spoiler, go and watch this first, but then you shouldn't be listening to this if you haven't watched it already. I do like the fact that they pulled the stake out of the count and killed Emil with it, but then the count resurrected and got up.
Yeah.
That was good.
I actually like how kind of not expensive the effects were in this, but they almost made them more unnerving when they were using it. Like the little drops of blood were like the animation pattern, and then his that stake hole refilling.
Yeah.
Like that was pretty cool. That was a good idea.
And actually, even though some of the effects were quite dodgy, I was just going to say, always burn your vampires after you stake them. Make sure you burn them or decapitate them straight away. Yeah. Don't leave them in their tomb because the stake might fall out, somebody might knock it. But yeah, I mean, some of the effects were kind of very, not ropey really, but I feel like, for instance, there's an attack with a jaguar on the family of you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
Well, it's basically so one of the people who killed the count originally, him and his family are trying to flee out of this infected area where the plague is and past the roadblock, and they pay the dwarf from the circus to take them, and of course it's a setup, and they get attacked by this jaguar, and I feel like, you know, the director and Hammer do the best they can with very, very limited resources. But it is a toy jaguar being thrown around with very fast cutting and blood being thrown everywhere, and it's rubbish. But then straight after that, when Dora kind of like coincidentally comes through the same area and falls over the corpses, what's left of them is actually quite gross. And quite,
that was disgusting.
Yeah,
but what was clearly like a hand puppet.
It's a knitted jaguar.
Yeah, it was just like, it's adorable as it's murdering you.
It's like Edward, look scared, Bella, look scared. Wave the tentacles around. So, but I mean, most of it was really well done, I thought,
Yeah, I wouldn't say it goes on to, like, there's no, like, deeper themes to Vampire Circus, but just the visuals they have, the way they kind of mess with the various characters, I think some of the ideas they have of, like, as the movie opens, or you get to that 15 years later thing, as Simon mentioned, this plague that's arrived. And it seems to be stemming from you eventually figure out it's rabies that's coming from the cave where Count Orlok, or whatever his name is
seeping out.
Right, basically just his evil has gotten into the bats that live in that cave that is now spreading out across. And so there's kind of the two, they say, the two things we have to fight, both the plague and the vampire sort of thing. So
did find amusing how early on the Doctor, who's kind of new to the village, or he's come since that happened 15 years ago, he's like, you're superstitious rubbish, there's nothing like vampires. And even the schoolmaster kind of goes, we only killed a man years ago. And I'm like, you were there, dude. That definitely wasn't a man. But then later on the Doctor goes, blimey, there are vampires. And it's like, that's quick. It's like
well, he went back, but he goes all the way back to the capital. Where he is revealed, he
gets his one jar of medicine, really small jar of medicine, from the looks of it.
Apparently mixed into oatmeal or whatever. But he finds out, from some sacred texts or whatever, there actually are vampires, and they've hidden it from people all along. But
he does
I bought that. I bought that. And they do send him with the royal guard to go take care of the issue. But I think it's it's a good Halloween spooky movie. I think it does try to do some things that are a little beyond. This is the 18th iteration of Bela Lugosi. There is definitely a lot of sexiness to kind of what's happening with the vampires.
So, I mean, you go straight into a sex scene right at the start, and I actually found the most erotic part was actually the kind of Catwoman dance, which was a bit.
Let's talk about the Catwoman dance. Because I have a lot of questions.
I'm surprised they got away with it. Because, I mean, she was... Obviously, her groin area was covered, but nothing else was. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching it and kind of finding it quite amusing, because I'm like, that guy is going to be... Because she's kind of dancing with this guy who's, I suppose, supposed to be like a lion tamer, and they're doing this erotic dance. And I'm like, he's going to be covered in green paint soon. And he kind of had a bit on him, but not too much.
Yeah, I can only imagine how many times they just stop. Get another shirt out, go launder that shirt, wash his face off just to get through the shoot. And at one point you can see her bald cap.
This is it. So I had to pause it at some point to go and get a cup of tea or something. And it paused and she had a terrible bald cap on when you had the frozen frame. Mm-hmm. But, it was moving fast enough normally that you got away with it.
Yeah, but you could see it starting to come loose behind her ear. Yeah. And I was curious because later when you see they've been drained of blood, the vampires have used them to... Yeah. Her head's covered in a scarf. So I was like, what crazy haircut did she have in real life? Because they apparently... I looked it up the first time I watched the movie. Like, these people were not film actors. I think this was like the thing they were doing around Europe at the time, and Hammer was like,
oh wow,
yeah, come be in the movie and just be weird. This will fit totally in with Vampire Circus.
So this could have been a good double bill as well with Mutations, or Freaks.
Oh yeah,
either of those films really, because they're both kind of Circus kind of based as well, sideshow based.
Yeah.
But yeah, that stood out for me, and I just like there's lots of weird stuff like that. I like how the two acrobatic kind of twins, who are both these kind of young vampires, very kind of good looking vampires, male and female. I like how they entice victims into the mirror, and they're kind of standing on the other side of the mirror. I thought that was well done. You know,
they were my favorite part of the movie. Both, the kind of weird, even before they really show up, when they're doing their acrobatic stuff and they're cross-cutting with the bats.
Yeah.
That honestly felt very much like something I would have tried to do in film school.
All the villagers going, ooh, that's normal. Ooh.
Yeah. How do
they do that?
But yeah, the presents they kind of give the twins, as they are the children, I assume they are, of Orlok and the schoolmaster's wife.
Yeah, because she does say "my children" when they die, and gets really upset. And then later on, well, it's kind of funny because
they're also trying to kill Dora, their own half sister.
Well, and also she herself, doesn't seem to really give a crap in the church. She's almost like Geller, but then of course, right at the end, when he's about to bite her, she kind of like slow motion leaps in front of his fangs and gets killed herself.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, well, kind of make your mind up there. What are you trying to do, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they were trying to give her the benefit of the doubt of her repenting her ways and whatnot. But
yeah.
Anyway, it's so kind of weird.
Yeah.
If nothing else, to see something from that era that's a little more unsettling, but not one to watch necessarily with your younger kids.
No, I mean it's not, and like we said about Vamp last time, it's not terrible. I mean, kids will probably even laugh at it these days, but I mean, there's definitely nudity in it.
Yeah,
and
that's the
sex.
big thing. Yeah, it's very sexual. The funny thing is, there is a poster for Vampire Circus in the clubhouse in Monster Squad.
Oh wow!
But I think they've torn off the bottom where it actually says what the name of the movie is. You can't see that, but it is the box art I've seen for Vampire Circus.
That's so cool.
Yeah, when they're trying, I think it's when in the part where they're trying to get the guy to pass the quiz to join the Monster Squad.
Yeah. So respect for that.
I never knew what that poster was until I watched this movie. So.
Well, I feel like this does shake down as a great late period Hammer film, and just a great film in general, and kind of like Brides of Dracula that didn't have Christopher Lee and just had Van Helsing kind of mopping up the remnants of Dracula's reign. I feel like this does a lot of stuff differently, but kind of sticks to the lore and does a really good job about it. And and the thing about Hammer, even lower tier Hammer, where the stitching was starting to show, the joins, they still put an effort in. That's what I love about them. They still, kind of try to give 100%.
Yeah, I think they tried to get a good script together, and they were still thinking, okay, what can we do that's crazy, that can draw in the audience. I mean, I do like those early Hammers, but there's not much that's crazy. It's more of just really well executed versions of Dracula and Frankenstein with good actors, but
they play it straight.
Yeah, but then I think of something like Dracula's 1972, then I'm just like, oof. Like I want to love this movie. I'm not loving this movie. So when they push it to this level, that's when I can get back into what they were doing at that time.
Well, I was also thinking, watching it yesterday, when it started off with that sex scene so kind of fast, I was thinking it's funny because, like, if you jump back to 1960, the height of eroticism in a Hammer film was like, seeing a woman in a nightie. Yeah,
it was décolletage was the most you could expect out of one of those. It feels like whiplash strange to jump between those.
Well, Christopher Lee would turn up and her hair would fall down, and you'd be like, oh, hello. And then about 5 years later, it would be a low cut 90, and then by the end of the 60s, it would be like a see-through 90. Yeah. And I feel like in this, it's like, we don't need any goddamn 90s. So that's progress. That's progress.
We're making it sound like this movie is like a ribald, whatever. It happens. There's a lot of implied sexiness and things that happen. There is definitely nudity and sex in the movie.
Yeah, you don't see too much there. You don't see too much.
Yeah, it's not like this is a softcore or anything like that.
No, trust us.
In comparison to, we also watched...
Yeah, Innocent Blood, which I think I've been trying to get you to watch for a while, a bit like Vamp. It was made by John Landis. I think only his second horror film. It's funny because he's known as a master of horror, but he's only actually made this and American Werewolf. And of course, American Werewolf, a classic. I think everybody agrees. This was also made at the end of kind of his successful run of movies in '92. So he was kind of like probably. I mean, this wasn't a box office hit. This actually totally died at the box office. Only made $4 million.
I will say this about Innocent Blood. I only ever remember seeing the box on the shelf and not knowing what it was. I don't remember any TV advertisements for it. I don't remember ever seeing any trailers for it.
Yeah.
When this came on, I kept expecting, like, oh, I'm going to click to now remembering seeing trailers or something.
Yeah.
Nothing. Like, I don't know. I am sure it got a theatrical release.
Yeah.
But I was going to the movies all the time when this came out.
I don't think it lasted long at all.
I think it was probably in and out in like a week or two.
Yeah. I never saw it theatrically. I was at college, and I had just got to college, or it was my first Christmas at college. And all my housemates had left. So I had the house to myself. And I was like, okay, I've got a few days before I need to go home. And I haven't got anything to do, so I'm going to hire some videos. So I went and got this, Brain Dead or Dead Alive, and and here's me trying to be sensitive. Map of the Human Heart, and I watched those three and loved all three of them, because I was trying to keep up with my Sam Raimis and my John Landises at the time, and I remember enjoying it, but then for years afterwards finding it really hard to get hold of. In fact, I think I had an old Blockbuster rental copy for a lot of years, just because you couldn't really get hold of it anywhere.
Yeah.
And then even this DVD we watched today is a total bare bones Warner Archive one that's only come out in the last couple of years, I think. So it's kind of strange to me in a way that we haven't had a special edition of this when we've had special editions of almost lesser known films, or at least
This is yeah. I mean, I obviously knew nothing about Vamp when we talked about that.
Yeah.
This, I couldn't begin to tell you. I don't know anyone who's ever talked to me about this movie because I would have remembered. I think the only time I ever saw it mentioned was there used to be this like Dungeons and Dragons role playing game thing called Vampire this something or other.
Yeah. The
horror or personal. I don't know. Anyway. I don't want to get into all that because that's a whole other hour talk about what that was, but because people would LARP it, which means live action role playing. So you could go to the Texas Union when I was a student, and there'd be all these people dressed in all black, walking around being vampires, playing this game.
Yeah,
I never. Anyway,
I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah, but they were here's some recommended viewing, and I think I saw it listed in but
this came out pretty close to Coppola's Dracula, and I know John Landis was we got to get out before Coppola because he's going to steal the audience. Of course, he still did because nobody saw this. I know also John Landis kind of got pissed off because this was marketed by Warner without telling him outside of America as A French Vampire in America. They changed the title to that, and he was like, that's rubbish. Why did you do that? But he kind of said he wanted to make a film that was like Scorsese had made a Hammer film, and I think he kind of succeeded. It's definitely Goodfellas in there, and The Sopranos before The Sopranos, and
yeah, I'm not sure that's necessarily going I like spaghetti and I like chocolate sauce. What will happen if
chocolate spaghetti with the best thing ever?
We're gonna keep the tomatoes in there. I won't say I disliked this movie, but it is not one I'm going to be in a mad rush to watch again. It was tonally all over the place. I mean, straight up. I thought from just the packaging, because I had seen it on the shelf, here and there, it was going to be a lot more I think the movie was called Nadia, that came out in the mid-90s, and it was about Dracula's daughter, living in New York and, being moody and, drinking blood, and it was filmed with, Fisher-Price cameras. I'm not even kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a crazy movie if you've never seen it, but it's I thought that's what it was going to be. It was not that, and it couldn't decide. I think between being this is a gang because of the gangster stuff, and the
it overwhelmed the horror, really. And I mean, I
couldn't even tell if they're trying to be serious or not. I couldn't tell if they were trying to make a comedy at different times.
I felt because both of these films I haven't watched for probably about 5 years, and whereas Vampire Circus, I guess I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot how good that was. This one kind of went the other way. I will agree with you, because I was a little bit like, I wasn't sitting there going, I'm embarrassed to show Ryan this. Why did I bring this round? I'm ashamed of myself. But it wasn't that bad. But it was more like, just like, wow, I forgot, like you say, the tone's all over the place, and I forgot the pacing's not that good.
Yeah.
And also, what really got me was, like, I felt like John Landis was overloading it with old film clips and cameos, which he's done before. Mm-hmm. But boy, was there a lot of them.
Yeah, he was like, Joe Dante, I'm going to show you, man. I'm going to show you how you load a film with cameos.
I mean, it just,
I'm going to own cameos.
It kind of seemed to almost capsize the film a bit. And like you say as well, it's like, so it's a mob movie with vampires. Or is it a vampire movie with mobsters? I mean, American Werewolf kind of managed that balance between comedy and horror.
Yeah.
Because it scared the hell out of you.
But it was also dealing with the absurdity of the situation in a way that didn't make it feel like, are mobsters hilarious? Like...
Yeah, well, they were kind of played relatively straight, I think.
Until they weren't. There were whole sections where they were like, whoa, and the cops were like, we're spooking each other in the hallway before we storm the...
Do you think it was an effect of Landis just having made Oscar with Stallone? So he's kind of lost his mojo, but he's also been doing comedy gangsters, and that might have hurt him a little bit.
I don't know. I have no idea why. Honestly, it felt to me like,
because there's good stuff in this.
Yeah,
there's definitely good stuff.
Yeah, there's stuff that's interesting, that's good. If I was to tell you the setup, which is complicated, which is,
it's a vampire.
Well, there's a vampire. Who is very nude at the beginning of the movie. I felt like they talked an actress into something she didn't know what she was getting into.
Well, like you said, it's also that last gasp of, we can have nude actresses walking around and not kind of get told we're being exploitative.
Well, I mean, they were definitely being totally exploited.
Well, yeah.
But they didn't... I think they told her she was in an artistic... Yeah, she was making an artistic decision. And
I watch a lot of art.
Right. And she's from Europe. I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, there was a little...
She's French. Man.
Yeah, she's French. And it was the actress who was in La Femme Nikita. Yeah. So it's about a guy who is... he's an undercover cop.
Yeah, well, yes. She's lost her lover, and she's starving, and she goes out and attacks a gangster, I guess, doesn't she?
Yeah. And meanwhile, there's a gang war that's on, which we never really see. We just see it in the headlines of paper.
Can't afford it.
Yeah. Very much so. And Anthony LaPaglia plays this undercover cop who's been hanging out with the mob for a few years, and he's forgotten who he is, or has he? And so they try and do this like morally gray thing with him that never really pans out, because he's totally a white knight through the whole movie.
Well, he won't kill the guy, will he? And he's kind of let off the hook just by the fact that Robert Loggia is kind of a nutter, so kind of grabs the gun off him and does it anyway.
Yeah.
But he's surrounded by... So the cast of this is basically half The Sopranos before The Sopranos.
We're not even kidding. It absolutely those actors.
And it's like Chaz...
commentary.
Yeah, we got Don Rickles in there. Yeah. I guess because he was in Kelly's Heroes when he met John Landis as the runner on that film.
Oh, right.
And I think they got close. And... Angela Bassett in a very unforgiving role as the kind of the tough police chief.
Yeah, she's the DA. Yeah.
But and it's like so basically it's got pretty, like you said when it started. They've got every Italian American actor in this basically.
Because Anthony LaPaglia is actually Australian, believe it or not.
I think I knew that. Yeah. I knew that from somewhere. But he always plays.
He's been playing an Italian American for like 30 years. So.
And like you said, it kind of halfway through, it kind of turns into a buddy comedy. Almost.
I turned to Simon at one point when they jump in the car together and they're going to take off after the bad guy at about the halfway point, and I said, "Did this just turn into a buddy cop picture?" And he said, "Yeah, it did." I was like, "Oh, okay."
She also jumps off the roof. I've got a problem with this. I can't let this go. But she jumps off the top of a church, lands on his car,
which she intends to take.
So she wants the car. But then she spends about a minute knocking out the windscreen because it's all smashed now, and then drives off. But he manages to jump in and like blah 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 banter. But later on, another vampire does the same jump and just lands on the street. And I'm like, why didn't she just land on the street and have a perfect car? That would have been so much easier.
Yeah, it made no sense.
Yeah, and there was too many bits like that didn't make sense, I think.
Yeah, they try to, I think, modernize it. You know, we were talking about like the crucifix thing in Vampire Circus. She's clearly not bothered by any of that.
Don't like garlic.
Yeah, she goes into a church, right? She doesn't like garlic. That's a whole major key plot point. Yeah. So I think they're trying to, and you can just hear yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
So I think they're trying.
Vampire Circus, the kids couldn't see the two acrobats behind them, and
So I think in this one they were trying to suggest it was more of like a virus or biological thing, which is kind of trendy to do in movies.
Well, there's a sex scene as well, which, you know, John Landis likes his sex scenes. Like in American Werewolf obviously has a famous sex scene, which I think in American Werewolf is kind of earned by the characters and feels a lot more natural. But then even in that you could say it's a bit rushed. Whereas in this, I mean, like you said, I wouldn't sleep, however good looking she is, I wouldn't sleep with a man-killing monster vampire.
Yeah.
Because she might go nuts and kill you, you know, you don't know.
Well, just in general, ethically.
Yeah. But they have this scene with some condoms, and I was like, where did they get those condoms from? Because neither of them were planning this. And I think, you know, again, it was the time of AIDS and stuff, but I just felt like the sex scene kind of...
There were a number of things in this movie that felt to me like studio notes.
Yeah.
And that was definitely one. It made me wonder about where Landis was and dealing... Like, he wasn't doing Animal House, or he was just doing whatever he wanted to do. Yeah. I felt like the entire ending...
Well, you say that. I actually read something where he said he had not much budget, but a huge amount of freedom.
Really?
They actually kind of left him alone.
Huh.
Because he was going to do his own vampire film, and they turned him down, but they said, would you rather do this one? And gave him the script for Innocent Blood. And he said, he said they kind of left him alone, but he just didn't really have much money. Yeah.
Huh. Well, then I got no explanation, because I was going to give him an out on a lot of things, saying, well, I think the studio made him do this, or the studio made him do that. Like, I thought the entire ending was crazy and unmotivated, like the last 20 seconds of the movie.
It's weirdly like the end of the Bond film License to Kill, but a lot worse, because he kind of like Jamie said, you know, Robert Loggia was kind of standing there going, you know, come on in, you know, fucking get me or whatever, for about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they very slowly lit the gasoline with a lighter. And I'm like, dude, he could just stepped even a couple of steps to the right. He'd have been okay.
Well...
Has he gone power mad? I don't know. Or you think he can survive that?
I think, yeah. I mean, I don't think it matters. I think it was just bad. But I was talking more like she then turns around and goes, I'm going to go walk into the sunrise. And he's like, no, there happens to be a hotel right here we're going to take you into so you don't have to see the sun, because I love you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you met her 10 hours ago.
And you've had sex once.
Yeah. I mean...
She's French, though.
She's French, so... yeah. It and everything he knows, because she says, well, I murder people, and he's like, well, nobody's perfect, like, and then it's like, wah, wah, wah. And it's like, this is not Some Like It Hot.
We'll be on the run forever.
Yeah.
It's like, my life will be horrible. Well, like I said as well, is it going to end up like Let the Right One In, where he's just going to be like her companion, but he's going to age and end up this old decrepit little guy she's kind of like trying to dump or get rid of for somebody sexier? I don't know.
All I know is if you think your happy ending's gonna come through murder, like a lot of murder.
I guess she only kills bad people. She only kills bad people.
Bad people. I'm doing air quotes. I guarantee you when they're yeah.
I mean, I mean, I enjoyed it, but I found it a bit hard work. A bit of a slog this time, I must admit. More than I remember.
There were things in it I thought were really good.
John Rickles disintegrating.
That was excellent, that whole sequence. I thought the part where he's trying to track her down and then right up through the part where she breaks into, I guess it was Catholic school, and then into the thrift store and into the church and all that stuff. But like you said, the pacing's really off. Like that sequence went on proportionate to the movie way too long for what the payoff was, which is he lost her.
It felt long as well. Like Vamp last week or whenever we saw it kind of felt like kind of the perfect length, whereas this felt like they could have edited 10-20 minutes out of this. Really, it's
they could have cut out the entire thing between, honestly, where she like takes the shower and all that to get cleaned up, and him having to crawl up the side of the building and chase her down with it. I was like, where did that German Shepherd come from? There's just this random German Shepherd that's just like and luckily they do explain it like 5 seconds after. I was like, where did the dog come from? It was some guy who was walking his dog who tied it up for 2 seconds. But yeah, it's very confusing in the moment. And I'm very unmotivated. But yeah, they could have cut from basically the church to the thrift store and not missed a beat. Like we don't really need to know that she like stopped and washed herself of the blood. We can assume she cleaned herself up somehow.
Yeah.
So there was but it did have the cool thing in the church with the camera being like her POV. That said, it was like, well, we never see her fly, and she was flying in that sequence.
And why is she climbing and jumping other times?
Yeah.
If she can do that.
Right.
Because that would seem a bit pointless. Which could just be budget stuff, obviously, but I think it's how you handle it. You've got to be consistent with your powers or whatever. Because, I mean, again, like, both of them, her and, Robert Loggia, both had scenes where they showed how fast they could move. Because Robert Loggia's coming out of his house and, his henchman's in the limousine and says, quick, boss, over here. Because the police are coming. And then suddenly Robert Loggia's like, in the car going like, hurry the fuck up. Because he's like a vampire. He can move faster than we can tell. But then at the end he's just standing there. And I'm like, he could have attacked them both or taken the lighter off them or blah blah blah, or at least off the guy. So I'm like, it's not adding up.
It has some issues. I think that probably is why even like vampire aficionados, big vampire fans haven't championed it. Haven't embraced it. If you think about other stuff that was coming out at this point, like Near Dark and some other things like that, that just had kind of a better mythology. Like we never really know anything about the main character. We don't really know anything about anything about Polya either. And it just,
he's a loose cannon.
It just and the score is so of its period. It's not bad, but it makes you definitely go, I know exactly when this movie came out.
Well, it's also the school's trying to do kind of what the Untouchables did with the do you remember Ennio Morricone's music in the Untouchables for Al Capone? So every time Al Capone came on, he was like wow 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 wow, and it's like kind of showing that decadence and that big horns and whatever. And he was kind of doing that, but it just didn't really work, or it didn't work in this context. They probably should have played it a bit straighter, like you say, because I think there was kind of just too much comedy in this. I think American Werewolf went a long way on, Jack and some jokes, and and a lot of black humour, like that his victim was kind of saying, "You kill yourself this way," but in this it was just like again and again and again. It's hitting you too many times, right?
I mean, there's just stuff even like at the beginning. I think they showed that. I think it's the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. I did not look it up before the movie, before we started recording this. And like Chaz Palminteri stops, watches it, and goes, "I love that." And you're just kind of like,
leads the policeman.
And I mean, it's kind of a cute moment, and it's probably as close to like gallows humor as I get with some of the wackier moments in it to me. But I don't know. I'm gonna say, if you got to pick one for your Halloween, this is probably not the one. I'm not exactly sure when I'd tell you to watch, or if I would tell you to watch this one.
I would say watch it just because it does do something different with vampires, and I like how it mixes them with the Italian mob, and I think that's interesting. It has flaws, and I think you kind of see a lot of John Lennis's weaknesses coming through, and maybe the beginning of his kind of his downward kind of like trajectory as a director. But I think there's still nothing there to enjoy, you know. I think Don Rickles is great. I think Robert Loggia is great. I love where he's eating the steaks. And like they're just watching him. and you know, he's got some, I mean, there's so many like cameos and great actors in here that, you know, you can't really go wrong.
It actually, that alone is worth watching because there's so much stuff tucked in that was like John Landis talking to himself. And I mean, Forrest Ackerman, who was the guy who developed Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine and was the editor until his death, is in the movie. Yeah. Like, it's talking to that audience.
Oh, yeah. You got Sam Raimi as a guy who's kind of running this meat freezer. And, you know, you got Dario Argento as an ambulance driver. And it's just like, you know, they pop out. Some of them work and some of them don't. But I think, you know, Frank Oz has a great little scene as basically the kind of like, I guess the pathologist, I guess. He's the guy kind of doing the autopsy. Or something, yeah. And, you know, and that's, you know, again, not quite as good as, you know, his cameo in American Werewolf, but it's still pretty funny.
Actually, that's a highlight, for sure.
So I think definitely check it out. It kind of needs to be known more, I think, because it is still, even more than Vamp, I think it's just like a lost film, you know. And like I say, it hasn't really had a decent release until very recently, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because John Landis is a big enough name. It's surprising that hasn't happened, unless it's a rights thing, maybe. I don't know.
On the special effects, we talked a little bit of the camera swooping around. I would actually be really curious to hear how they did the eyes effect, which is like omnipresent throughout the movie.
Well, I feel like sometimes it was contacts, and then other times they almost seem to be put on. Like when the two henchmen stood up, you know, when they kept biting each other and bringing in two new guys and like, meet the family. Yeah. It was almost like they were projected on there, or
I couldn't figure it out,
or put on later.
Yeah, I'll be reading up on how they did that, but if I can find it. But
other times, like Don Rickles was in bed, I was pretty sure that was just like fancy contact lenses.
Yeah, there was kind of a difference between them doing some extreme close-ups and some slightly wider shots, and whether sometimes the eyes lit up, which clearly wouldn't be. Yeah, you know, it could be the way you bounce the light off the contact. I know that. You know, if nothing else, CGI has brought actors. It's that they don't have to shove full eyeball contacts into their face to get, you know, a 5-second shot out, which I've heard those contacts were exceedingly painful.
Yeah. Well, I saw John Landis a few years ago because he came to do like a kind of Halloween Fright Fest, and he showed his favourite movies. And I think he showed an old Dr. Jekyll, and he showed one of the kind of like Dr. Moreau versions, and he ended up showing Innocent Blood. That was like he showed that last, and he was talking about it a little bit, and I remember him kind of saying, yeah, her eyes, her contact lenses changed colour in the sex scene because she was orgasming. Yeah. So I think she goes like from red to blue to green.
I noticed that.
But it's like, but you know, I mean, some of the effects are really good, and I think some could be better. I did like the fact that after they're kind of killed or vampirized, they basically look like a corpse, and then as they feed, they kind of look better and better the more times they kind of feed. You know, Robert Loggia, you know, when he first kind of comes around, he's you know running around like shouting for his lawyer, and then like, you know, once he accepts what's happened, he's like, this is great, this is, you know, brilliant, you know, we're going to take over the city. So yeah, you know, and Steve Johnson did the effects, so the effects are going to be pretty good there. Who, you know, Steve Johnson, who did Gremlins 2 and stuff. So yeah, so you know, good stuff in here. Definitely worth a look. But I think Vampire Circus wins it decisively out of this double bill.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to pit two movies against each other. I have enjoyed kind of watching, you know, some non opera cape vampire movies. But yeah, of the four we watched, this was probably the one I was kind of like, the most by the end of it. Which, you know, they've all been pretty good. So what are you going to do? Yeah. And probably the most opera capey was probably Fright Night, you know.
Yeah, and I think, you know, knowing it was, you know, and like playing with it. I mean, like I say, I love the Christopher Lee Dracula movies. And he made 7 for Hammer. And towards the end, even he was like, you know, they were kind of blackmailing me, saying if I didn't do this, loads of people would be out of work. And you can understand his dissatisfaction because, he pops up for 5-10 minutes. Quite often doesn't even have any words.
He doesn't in 72, I don't think.
Yeah, and just kind of hisses in the corner, and then he's put out of his misery. Hammer did try other things, but I think Vampire Circus, they made a decisive step away from that, and that was a good thing. Even if it didn't work, that was a good thing. And John Landis, for all his faults, I feel like with Innocent Blood, at least he was trying something different. Don't think it was particularly successful, but interesting.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, have a happy Halloween. I'm not sure exactly how many more of these or if we're going to do any more because we've got quite a few in the can at this point. But, no matter what, I hope your Halloween is spooktacular.
Go do your noise again.
Ooh.
That's pretty good.
Another night to dream about you. Night, each lovely night, the only time I'm not without.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed this podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. You can drop comments on this podcast and let us know what you think. We do have a Signal Watch Patreon, and if you're so moved, we'd most certainly appreciate your support. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies. You've got to be kind.